Hello, this is Brooks Whittington with halfwheel.com. Today we're taking a look at the Elie Bleu EBC-4 cigar cutter. Now, this was a new cutter that was introduced during the 2021 PCA Convention and Trade Show by Manny Iriarte Enterprises, which is a new venture from Manny Iriarte, who is a longtime collaborator with Arturo Fuente on projects like the Opus X 20th packaging, watches, and things of that nature. Now, Manny and his Opus X Society released a number of different products during the show, some of which were branded with Fuente branding and some of which were not. Things like humidors and lighters and rocks glasses and so on. Some of these items were the double guillotine cutters. Now, there are three versions of this cutter that are made by Elie Bleu, and they all had different branding from Fuente brands. For example, this is the Grand Reserva, and there was also the Don Carlos version as well as the Hemingway version. Now, all of these branded ones actually cost $215 each. However, Elie Bleu does make 5 different colors that are not branded with Fuente brands, and they cost a little bit less at $190. Now, in terms of physical specs, the EBC-4 is a double guillotine cutter, as I mentioned before, 2 blades, and it's a fairly simple design. And basically, you open it up by pushing down on this trigger here, which opens up the top blade on a spring trigger. Now, both of these blades are made of stainless steel. And in terms of the specs, the cutter weighs 4.8 ounces, measures 1.7 inches long, and 0.37 inches thick, with a total height of 2.57 inches when it's closed, like so, and 3.5 inches when it's fully opened, like so. Now, each of the different Fuente branded versions cost $215, and they come with a nice gift box as well as a velvet carrying pouch, which is very nice and very well made. Now, it should be noted that the EBC-4 can be purchased without the Fuente branding. Exact same cutter, just with regular colors instead of a Fuente branding, and the cost on those is $190 each. All right, now that's out of the way, I thought I would show you how to actually use this cutter to actually cut a cigar. So, as I mentioned, it is a very basic double guillotine cutter design, and it's opened basically by pulling down on this trigger here in the front. When you pull down on that, the spring-loaded top section pulls up, or goes up, and opens up, I guess. And you basically, it's on a track, and so it's very, very smooth when you're actually using it. It has just enough tension to make it so that you really, really are, you know exactly what you're doing when you're actually using it. It's not just loose in there. And I thought that I would have some problems, perhaps, at some point with it being loose. But it did not seem to have any issues whatsoever, especially after all of the cigars that I cut with it. It's still just as nice as when I started. Now, in order to actually cut the cigar, you basically take the cap, you put it into the opening, and this is another cool thing about this cutter is you can see exactly how much of that cap you want to take off. You want to take off a little, you want to take off a lot. It doesn't matter, but you can actually see exactly what you're cutting. And so you put it into the cap into the opening, you get it positioned there, and then you just push through in a very nice, clean, even motion, and it pops right off. As you can see, very, very clean cut with that. No issues whatsoever. I'm a little bit off in terms of angle, but the cap itself is clean. This thing right here was because I was pushing it back and forth, not because of the cutter. So, the very, very clean cut, and that's basically what I had for the majority of the cuts that I got with this cutter. It was consistent. It's very, very easy to use and very, very well balanced to make it just a joy to pick up and cut a cigar with very easily. So now that I've shown how to cut a cigar, we can go into some good and bad things about the cutter as I was using it for about 2 months. First good thing, really, really nice, very simple right off the bat, is the fact that you do get those clean and consistent cuts off of this cutter. Now, it's a double guillotine blade, so it's going to give you pretty decent cuts regardless. I've rarely run into a double guillotine blade that gives you bad cuts. However, or at least horrible cuts. However, this really is very nice in terms of, in terms of the upper quality of the cuts that you get. They're consistent, they're clean, it's easy to use, and it's just a really nice cutter in that regard. It does have this unique exterior art. If you're a Fuente fan, this is definitely something that you would probably want to try to spend the money for in terms of that. It's a piece that you can take out and people will, oh wow, this is pretty cool. What is this? It's well made, extremely high quality, well balanced when you're actually using it, smooth as butter. This trigger is smooth as butter, and the track had no issues whatsoever. I was concerned, as I am with any situation where you have a automatic trigger, that this would start to get looser or something of that nature. It does have some give to it. It has to, obviously, because of the nature. But in terms of actually becoming loose or anything like that, there is no indication of that whatsoever. It is extremely well built and a very high quality piece. And finally, as I mentioned, you can see exactly how much of that cap you're cutting. Very important to me, and something that I don't see, that some of these cutters, not necessarily double guillotine, but some of these cutters, different types of cutters, you don't have that advantage. And it's something that is very, very important to me when it comes to actually being able to just decide exactly how much of that cap you want to take off. Now, there were some bad things, of course, that I ran across, some disadvantages, some issues. Number one is the fact that you can only cut cigars up to about 64 ring gauge or so, and you're really just cutting a little bit of that cap off of that at that point. Anything above that, and you're really starting to get really inconsistent cuts. So if you cut, 70 ring gauge is a lot. I would definitely try it out before you actually buy one if you can. This is a very expensive cutter, and especially for a double guillotine, there are a lot of double guillotines on the market, and a lot of them cut very, very well. And this is a very, very expensive model for that. Obviously, you're paying for the Fuente branding. You're paying for the quality of the Elie Bleu construction, and it's definitely a quality piece. But it's not a cheap cutter, and that's definitely something you need to take into account. Finally, one very minor thing. I noticed as I was using this that the blade, the trigger, apparently can be triggered on its own while it's being carried in the bag specifically. Not in my pocket. I never had any problems when I had it in my pocket. And never any problems, obviously, when you're using the pouch as well, because that obviously, it'll protect that. But when I was actually carrying around in a bag, just open in a bag or loose in a bag, there were times when I reached in and the trigger had apparently triggered on its own, and the blades were open in that situation. Just be careful of that if you're carrying around in a bag, and bouncing back and forth and that kind of thing. And so after all of that, can I recommend the Elie Bleu EBC-4 cigar cutter? The answer is yes, with a couple of caveats. This is a very, very good cutter. It cuts cigars very well. It's extremely well made. It's very well balanced, and it looks great when you're cutting, the actual cigars. It took everything that I threw at it and had very, very few problems, and even those were minor. The caveats, well, it's very, very expensive, and especially for a double guillotine cutter, you can find, much, much cheaper double guillotine cutters out there that will cut cigars probably as well or almost as well, perhaps better, for quite a bit less money. And that's a problem when you're talking about, wanting to have a cutter that is both works and also, cost effective. However, if you're looking for a Fuente branded cutter and one that's going to last a long time and one that is very, very well made, this is a really great option. So for halfwheel.com, this is Brooks Whittington. For all of your cigar news and review related needs, go to halfwheel.com.